The arena lights dimmed on January 1st, 2025, and nobody knew they were witnessing the end of an era. Madison Rayne walked through the curtain one final time, her boots echoing on the metal ramp. Her heart carrying 20 years of memories that weighed heavier than any championship belt ever could. The crowd cheered, but they didn't cheer differently. They didn't know to savor every second. They didn't know this was goodbye. In professional wrestling, retirements are supposed to be spectacles. Legends are supposed to get their moment, the tearful speech, the standing ovation, the parade of peers coming out to shake hands and share embraces. Cameras capture every emotion. Commentators wax poetic about careers well lived. The final bell rings, and everyone knows it's the final bell. But Madison Rayne's career didn't end that way. It ended in silence, disguised as just another match on just another card. She had wrestled in front of thousands, held gold multiple times, trained countless wrestlers, and built a reputation as one of the most reliable performers in women's wrestling. Yet somehow, when the moment came to step away, it happened without fanfare. No retirement ceremony, no farewell tours, just a regular match that happened to be her last. The referee counted 3, her opponent's music hit, and Madison rolled out of the ring like she'd done 1,000 times before. Except this time, she wouldn't do it again. Backstage, she removed her gear slowly, folding her ring jacket with deliberate care. Other wrestlers passed by, laughing about spots in their matches, planning where to eat after the show. Nobody stopped to say goodbye because nobody knew there was anything to say goodbye to. Madison smiled at a few familiar faces, exchanged some small talk, and then quietly gathered her things. The locker room that had been her second home for 2 decades suddenly felt like someone else's space. She drove home alone that night, the rental car's headlights cutting through the darkness of an unfamiliar highway. Wrestling had always meant travel different cities, different hotels, different roads, leading to different rings. Now this road was leading her away from all of it. Her phone buzzed with the usual post-show messages from friends and colleagues. Normal conversations, nobody asking if she was okay, nobody sensing that something monumental had just occurred. And maybe that was how she wanted it. When she unlocked the door to her house, the silence hit differently than it ever had before. For 20 years, she had returned home tired but fulfilled, sore but satisfied, always knowing that in a few days or weeks, she'd be back in the ring. Wow! That certainty was gone. She sat on the edge of her couch, still wearing her travel clothes, and let the weight of finality settle over her. Madison Rayne's wrestling career was over, and almost nobody knew it yet. The news didn't break with a press release or a heartfelt social media post. It leaked into the wrestling world the way secrets always do, through whispers, through concerned text messages, through journalists asking questions that Madison wasn't ready to answer. 3 days after her final match, a wrestling news site published a brief report. Sources indicate Madison Rayne has quietly retired from in-ring competition. No details. No explanation. Just a sentence that turned speculation into something that felt too real. The wrestling community reacted with confusion first, then disbelief. Fans flooded social media with questions. Is this true? Why didn't anyone say anything? Did AEW just let her retire without acknowledging it? Fellow wrestlers who had worked with Madison for years were blindsided. Some reached out directly, their messages filled with surprise and hurt. "You didn't tell me," one text read. "I would have wanted to say goodbye properly." But Madison had made her choice deliberately. She didn't want the spotlight on her exit. She had spent her career in the background, making others look good, and she wanted to leave the same way. But silence, she was learning, could be interpreted as abandonment. Some fans felt cheated out of the moment they deserved the chance to appreciate her contributions, to chant her name one last time, to give her the send-off that seemed appropriate for someone who had given so much. Others speculated about darker reasons. Was she forced out? Did something happen backstage? The absence of an explanation created a vacuum that gossip rushed to fill. Wrestling thrives on narrative, and when there's no official story, people write their own. AU's response was measured and respectful, but it came late. A week after the news broke, Tony Khan tweeted his gratitude for Madison's contributions and wished her well in her future endeavors. It was professional, kind even, but it felt small compared to the career it was acknowledging. There was no special video package, no tribute show segment, no final appearance where she could address the fans. Just a tweet that got lost in the constant scroll of wrestling content. For someone who had devoted 2 decades to the craft, it felt insufficient to many who had watched her journey. Madison saw all of it: the confusion, the speculation, the well-intentioned tributes, the criticism of how her exit was handled. She read the messages from fans who said she deserved better. She saw the debates about whether AEW had failed her by not giving her a proper farewell. Part of her wanted to explain, to tell everyone that this was her choice, that she didn't want the ceremony and the emotion and the pressure of a perfect goodbye. But another part of her wondered if she had made a mistake. Maybe some moments require recognition, not for the person leaving, but for everyone who journeyed alongside them. People outside of wrestling often don't understand what 20 years in the ring actually means. It's not just the matches or the championships or the memorable moments that make highlight reels. It's the accumulation of everything that happens between the bells, the injuries that never fully heal, the relationships strained by constant travel, the birthdays and holidays missed, the identity built so entirely around being a wrestler that stepping away feels like erasing yourself. Madison had given wrestling everything, and now she was trying to figure out what was left when wrestling was gone. The physical toll had been mounting for years. Her body carried the evidence of 2 decades of bumps, chronic pain in her neck from repeated impacts, knees that ached before rainstorms, shoulders that required careful management just to get through daily life. She had wrestled through injuries that would have sidelined others, had performed when every movement hurt, had smiled for fans while wondering how much longer she could maintain the pace. The decision to retire wasn't made in a single moment of clarity. It was built slowly, through accumulated pain and the honest recognition that her body was telling her it was time. But the physical reasons, while real, weren't the whole story. Madison had spent the last few years watching the wrestling landscape change around her. New talent emerged, younger, hungrier, filled with the same fire she'd once carried. She saw the excitement in their eyes and remembered when she had looked at the world that way. Somewhere along the journey, that excitement had transformed into something else. Not bitterness. She loved wrestling too much for that, but a quiet exhaustion. The road that once felt like an adventure now felt like an obligation. The performances that once energized her now drained reserves she didn't have anymore. There was also the matter of legacy and relevance. Madison had built her career on being a solid, dependable performer. She was never positioned as the biggest star. She was always someone bookers could count on, someone who could work with anyone and make the match better. That role had given her longevity, but it also meant she had spent years watching others get the spotlight while she worked in the supporting cast. She had made peace with that, had found fulfillment in helping others shine. But as she approached the end, she wondered what she would be remembered for. Would anyone remember the thousands of small contributions, or would she simply fade from memory as someone who was also there during important eras? Her family had sacrificed alongside her, though they never wrestled a single match. Her children had grown up with a mother whose job meant weeks away from home, missed school events, and divided attention. Her partner had built their life around her schedule, supporting her dreams while sometimes putting their own on hold. Madison had always told herself it was worth it, that she was building something important. But in the quiet after her final match, she thought about all the moments she couldn't get back, the bedtime stories she hadn't read, the recitals she'd watched via FaceTime, the ordinary evenings at home that had been traded for extraordinary nights in arenas. The cost of her career suddenly felt very real and very high. 2 weeks after her retirement became public knowledge, Madison received a call that surprised her. It was from a young wrestler on the AEW roster, someone she had worked with only a handful of times. The conversation started awkwardly, the wrestler apologizing for bothering her, saying she didn't have to take the time. But then the real reason for the call emerged. "You helped me more than you probably know," the young woman said, her voice carrying emotion that couldn't be hidden. "That night you pulled me aside and talked through my match with me. When I was doubting everything, you changed my career. And I never got to say thank you properly." Madison felt something shift inside her. She had forgotten that moment-one conversation among hundreds she'd had with younger wrestlers over the years. To her, it had been just part of the job, the kind of mentorship that gets passed down in wrestling from generation to generation. But to this young wrestler, it had been transformative. The call continued, and more stories came out. Small moments Madison had forgotten, but that had meant everything to someone else. Advice given in hallways. encouragement offered before big matches, the quiet work of helping others navigate the same difficult path she had walked. More calls and messages followed in the days after, veterans reaching out to share memories, younger wrestlers expressing gratitude for training sessions, for advice, for the example she'd set. Fans writing long posts about what her career had meant to them, even if she'd never been their favorite wrestler. They wrote about consistency, about professionalism, about the reliability of knowing that whenever Madison Rayne was in a match, it would be good. They wrote about the women's wrestling evolution and Madison's role in it, not always at the forefront, but always present, always contributing, always making the industry better by being part of it. Some conversations were harder. A former tag team partner called, and they talked about the matches they'd had, the chemistry they'd built, and the ways the business had pulled them in different directions. There was nostalgia, but also regret things left unsaid during active years, because they were both too focused on the next town, the next match, the next opportunity. "We should have appreciated it more while it was happening," her former partner said, and Madison agreed. Wrestling demands so much forward momentum that it's easy to never pause and recognize what you're actually experiencing until it's already memory. She also heard from people she had expected to hear from but didn't. Colleagues she thought she'd been close with who remained silent. Promoters who had used her talents but didn't reach out when those talents were no longer available. The wrestling business is built on relationships, but it's also built on utility when you can't perform anymore. Some of those relationships reveal themselves as transactions rather than genuine connections. Madison had known this intellectually, but experiencing it emotionally was different. It hurt in ways she hadn't fully anticipated. Through all these conversations, the ones that happened and the ones that didn't, Madison began to see her career from new angles. She had defined herself by the matches, but others defined her by the impact. She had worried about being forgotten, but she was discovering that she had left marks on people that wouldn't fade simply because she wasn't wrestling anymore. Her legacy wasn't in highlight reels or championship reigns. It was in the wrestlers she'd helped, the fans she'd connected with, and the standard of professionalism she'd maintained even when nobody was watching. That legacy didn't require a retirement ceremony to be real. Spring came, and Madison Rayne woke up without the instinct to check her training schedule. 3 months had passed since her final match, and the wrestling world had moved on the way it always does. New stories, new feuds, new wrestlers capturing attention. Her absence had been noted and then absorbed. Life in AEW continued without her in the ring. But Madison's life was finding a different rhythm, one that didn't revolve around the next show or the next town. She had taken a role training the next generation of women wrestlers, working with AEW's developing talent. The work was fulfilling in ways she hadn't expected. Instead of taking bumps herself, she taught others how to take them safely. Instead of building her own matches, she helped young wrestlers understand storytelling, psychology, and the small details that separated good performers from great ones. She saw herself in their nervousness before big opportunities, in their determination to prove themselves, in their love for a business that demands everything and promises nothing in return. One evening, she sat in the empty training facility after everyone else had left. The ring stood in the center of the room, its canvas worn from the day's practice, its ropes still holding tension. Madison stepped through those ropes one more time, not to perform but simply to feel. She walked the perimeter, her hand trailing along the top rope, her boots finding familiar placement on the canvas. This ring wouldn't be her workplace anymore, but it would always be part of her. She had given wrestling 20 years, and wrestling had given her an identity, a purpose, and a story that was uniquely hers. Her phone buzzed. A message from Tony Khan. "Would you be interested in appearing on Dynamite next month? Not to wrestle just to be acknowledged properly? The fans deserve to celebrate you. I think you deserve that moment too." Madison stared at the message for a long time. Part of her still wanted to maintain the quiet exit, to let her career end the way it had, without spectacle, without pressure, without the emotion of a formal goodbye. But she thought about all the people who had reached out, all the fans who had said they wished they'd known to appreciate her final match, all the young wrestlers who might benefit from seeing a retirement handled with grace and intention. She typed her response, "Yes, but I want to do it my way." Over the following weeks, she worked with AEW's creative team to craft a moment that felt authentic. It wouldn't be a long speech or a parade of nostalgia. Would be simpler video package highlighting her career, an appearance in the ring to say thank you, and a chance for the fans to respond. No manufactured emotion, no dramatic announcements, just recognition of a job well done and a career completed with dignity. The night arrived, and Madison walked through the curtain for the first time in months. The crowd's reaction hit her immediately. Not the polite applause of a regular entrance, but the genuine appreciation of people who understood significance. She stood in the ring, microphone in hand, and looked out at the faces watching her. For 20 years she had performed for these people, and now they were giving her something back. She spoke briefly, thanking fans for their support, thanking AEW for the opportunity, and thanking wrestling for being the central story of her adult life. But then she did something unexpected. She called down several of the young women she'd been training, wrestlers who hadn't been on television yet, who were still learning their craft, who represented the future of women's wrestling. She introduced them to the crowd, putting the spotlight on them rather than keeping it on herself. "My career is over," she said, "but their careers are just beginning." And that's what wrestling is, one generation building the foundation for the next. As she left the ring for what might truly be the final time, Madison realized something profound. She had spent weeks worried that her quiet retirement meant her career would be forgotten, that without a spectacular ending, her 20 years would somehow count for less. But legacy isn't built in a single moment. It's built in the accumulated weight of thousands of moments, matches worked with professionalism, wrestlers mentored with generosity, standards maintained even when it would be easier to cut corners. Her retirement had been unconventional, even controversial in its silence. But it had also been honest. She had left on her terms, without forcing emotional spectacle, without making her exit about anything other than recognition that it was time. And now, having allowed the world to properly acknowledge her contributions, she could move forward without regret. The wrestling business would continue without Madison Rayne in the ring, but the impact of Madison Rayne would continue in the business and the wrestlers she trained, in the matches she had worked, in the example she had set. Her final bell had rung quietly on January 1st, but its echo would carry forward in ways she was only beginning to understand.